Welcome to the Human Behaviour Podcast, Perry Mardon's fortnightly foray into the conscious and unconscious behavioural dynamics involved in the creative process of creating one's life.
Welcome everybody to this podcast and video cast, and it is both. We do a video and we make it into a podcast as well. And here with me today is Josh Stone.
Hi everyone.
Josh runs our school, coaching the coaches, and is also our head facilitator and trainer at Mardon. Today what we're going to be talking about is the requirement to observe oneself and tell oneself the truth about one's behaviours and beliefs. And the reason that's important is that there's no change or transformation or the gaining of new results if one can't first observe the behaviours and beliefs that lead to results that don't work for you, and observe and tell oneself about the truth about the behaviours and beliefs that aren't serving you. So we know that being able to be self-aware, look inwards, see what drives behaviours and what drives actions is really important in taking control of what we call the creative process. So, Josh, a big subject for today.
Oh, and it's a great one, Perry. And it's a great one to start off our podcast and video cast series, because it's really a cornerstone of the work that we teach when we coach business clients. We coach other clients in other aspects of their life. One of the first things that we do is encourage them to really go inwards and observe their behaviours, observe the patterns that are running them, understand why there's certain thoughts that lead to certain actions. And we might be trying to create a goal in deepening relationships, or we've got a goal to start up a business, whatever it might be. Unless we can understand how we operate in those areas of our lives, it's really difficult to make a good quality and lasting change as we move forward.
Yeah, and it's probably important just to use and just to keep it to the most simple, explain it in the most simple way. If, you come back to the relationship goal that you're talking about as an example, if you can't see what it is that you're doing that has a negative impact on your partner and your partner's ability to connect with you, if you can't see that, if you can't see and identify those behaviours that aren't supporting a good relationship, you can't do anything about changing it. And it's the same thing if you've got a business goal as an example, and you're not getting the results that you want, but you're unable to look inside and go, okay, well, I'm not getting the results that I want because I'm deficient in this area, meaning I may not have enough knowledge about marketing, or I may not have enough knowledge about accounting. And that's because I'm deficient in behavioural patterns that support that type of learning. You can't change without being able to be self-aware and own what's not working. Now, and this brings us into a couple of different subjects, really. Like the first thing I want to say, there's two things I want to sort of look at, but the first thing is most people aren't even taught to self-observe. That's the first thing. So we don't get taught in school what I would consider to be a really fundamental requirement for life, to be honest, which is how do I observe this personality? How do I observe myself so that I can start to have some self-understanding and some control over the way that I behave and act? And the second thing I sort of want to talk about is that, when we do learn to self-observe, most people don't want to be truthful about what they see, because so those sort of two things we want to talk about. Now, if we just come back to a basic analogy, if I ask, if one of your kids breaks the one's too young, but if Eli is an example, and Eli, for those that are listening and watching, it's Josh's son. If Eli breaks the vase, and you come into the room and go, "Who broke the vase?" What would Eli? What might his natural response be?
Sometimes he goes, "No, it wasn't me, Dad. I don't know who broke the vase."
yeah, depending on where he is. So what often you'll see with little kids is that straight away. And by the way, the environment the kid grows up in is going to make this more likely to happen or not, depending on the parenting they've had. But often you'll see kids go, no, it wasn't me, you know, even though it was. And that's because the ego is a self-protection mechanism, doesn't want to get rejected, only wants to show the world the shiny side, show the self the shiny side until you've done a certain amount of inner work. So again, when we come back to ownership, but we have to be able to own every behavior, whether our ego likes it or not. And that's what sets off the transformational process. But if you can't own, because the ego goes, no, I don't want to admit that I'm a bastard in a relationship, or, you know, a bitch in a relationship, sorry for the language, but this is raw work, then that person can't change that. They just can't change that dynamic. So let's start with, you know, you, of course, because you've been doing this work for years, Josh, learn to observe your behaviors and belief structures. What brought you to that point, first of all, where you had to learn to self-inspect? I mean, in the sense, and you know, the question here is, you know, if most people aren't taught to self-observe, when we go to school, when we grow up, we're sort of taught to keep our awareness outside ourselves, about what's going on outside, not what's going on, which leads to, of course, emotional intelligence when you can self-observe and see these parts. So how did you learn to self-observe?
Well, I want to answer that question, Perry, but I also just feel like it's important for people who are watching or listening and they're sort of going, oh my goodness, yeah, I do things that don't support my goals, but you're right, like you said, Perry, I've never been taught that. I've never learned those skills, and it's important for everyone listening to not beat yourself up, because you weren't taught those skills. You weren't taught that it's important to self-observe and to take ownership for your actions. And you know, just staying with the example of the business creation, or wanting to start up a business, or you might be in business and things are starting to not go so well, and you're trying to understand why. You don't have the skills just yet to be able to understand why, and you're just going forward kind of blindly trying to make the most of the skills that you do have. And at some point there will need to be some ownership over the skills that you don't have, and some ownership around, okay, well, I need to get some training. I need to build skills in different areas, whether it's marketing or people management. But what we often see is people tend to be blind, or they tend to go into denial. Oh, it's someone else's fault, or it's someone else's fault that I'm not getting those goals in my business. And we don't tend to go inwards and go, you know what, it's actually me being deficient in those skills. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone. It's not your fault, because we weren't taught in school or high school or uni to observe ourselves. So it's only until you come to something like this kind of work, that you actually are taught how to self-observe and to own your actions and behaviors. And that's when you can start to move forward in really great leaps and bounds to create those goals.
Yeah, just a quick example. I find it humorous. I'd often, you know, do a lot of business consulting, and I'll be out and about, and I'll be with business owners, and they'll get together and they start moaning about their staff. And we see what we're talking about today in this story that I'm sharing. It's like, all they do is talk about their staff, and they complain about their staff, and you know, there's often a collusion happen, but they all get together, and all they're doing the whole time they have those conversations is going, there's nothing wrong with me, it's my staff. There's nothing wrong with me, because that's what egos do. In the same way as when you ask a kid who might have smashed something, did you do it? And they go first, no. And this is why people don't want to own, okay? Don't want to self-observe and own, because for most people, until you get your certain phase of development, you want to keep your ego identity in place, the positive ego identity in place. And one of the ways of doing that is not taking responsibility and finding a way of blaming others. So again, at the party, they're all complaining about their staff and blah, blah, all colluding, all feeling good and righteous, when they can go, oh, look how bad the staff were. And I ask this question, I say, who recruited them? And you just watch straight away the resistance. Now, we're using this business example, and until the business owner can go, hey, it's not my staff that's the problem, I'm the problem. So something I'm doing is the problem. You know, I haven't got good recruitment systems in place. I don't know enough about recruiting. I keep recruiting the wrong people. When a business owner can own those types of things, as an example, then there can be change. But if their ego's going, nothing wrong with me, I don't want to admit fault or weakness, or that I have the problem, it just can't change. So back to the observing, and you're an accomplished observer, and can maybe let's explain a little bit to the audience what it means to observe. Right? Yeah. What's your viewpoint? You have a go at your explanation, then I'm going to have a go at my explanation of what it actually means to observe and build the observer.
I even just want to come back and answer your initial question about why for me, in terms of wanting to, I guess, become conscious and understand my own thoughts and actions and behaviors. And it's not that it's cliche, but it's sort of early 20s, had a fairly intense period of my life where there was a lot of fairly, I don't want to call them negative, because I look back on them now and I wouldn't change a thing about what happened to me in my early 20s, but a lot of things happened for me that made me start to question my own thoughts, my own mind, my own way of operating. And I just went through a very incredible period of I guess you'd call it self-exploration, where I just needed to know everything about myself, and I wanted to know. I sort of uncovered this explorer part of my personality that just wanted to explore the very depths of my personality, and that obviously led me to this work. And then one of the core foundations of the work is developing that observing awareness.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, Josh, as you're talking and as you were sharing what brought you to it. I was just thinking that it's a searcher-explorer archetype that will usually bring people to the point of wanting to self-observe and understand self. And also, personally for me, I think that the human being's a mystery, and I can't think of anything more enjoyable than exploring human behavior, my own human behavior, because it's just so vast that it's fascinating. And then when we start to observe our own human nature and understand our own human nature, we can understand other people's human nature. But we'll come back to that. It's the searcher archetype. The searcher archetype, searcher explorer, wants to know, wants to understand things. So like some of the great physicists have a searcher explorer. Some of the great scientists have a great searcher explorer parts that are wanting to know more about the world, the universe, how it works. Now that same archetype can take you into wanting to understand psychology. It's really, what is this world about, or what is the truth about anything? So the searcher explorer archetype really has a lot to do with human evolution and breakthroughs in medical understanding or understanding of the world and science. A lot of spiritual people have the searcher explorer, trying to identify the meaning of life, or what this thing is, this world is. So you can see that explorer archetype, searcher explorer archetype that's looking for the truth, led you to this work. And same for me. But what am I? How do we work? How do we operate? What I want to say about self-observation before we move on is self-observation. For me, comes with the sort of following understanding. I'm not my personality. I can actually observe my personality once I train myself to. I can observe what it's doing. Like right at this point in time, I can observe what parts of my personality are communicating and speaking. This afternoon, I might be joking around with my kids, and a completely other part might come out. A clown part of my personality might come out. So, right now I'm in my teacher archetype, my presenter archetypes, or the presenter or teacher parts of my personality are something I know really, really well. And I can observe them playing out. It's got a certain voice tone. This afternoon, when I'm in my clown or my politically incorrect rebel, I'll have completely different emotional nuances. So I can observe my personality. I can observe all those different parts of the personality. I'm not my personality. So when you have that understanding and actually goes from intellectual knowledge to experience, well, I can observe my personality at any point in time with lots of conscious awareness. I can even explore my personality in the moment and what it's up to and what it's doing. You're already moving in a completely different way to the majority of the population. who first of all don't understand that their personality is made up of parts, and they can observe those parts at any point in time, compared to the person who doesn't understand that they're robotic in nature. They're just going to keep doing the same thing, have no ability to see how they're really operating or see the different parts, and therefore they can't even question those different parts or critique those different parts.
Well, really, that self-awareness and self-observation, Perry, we talk about it a lot. It gives you choices. So in the moment, like when you're in a fairly intense emotional situation, you're in an argument with someone, or you're having a discussion with someone at work, a robust discussion, and normally what would happen for you is you react in a certain way based on your belief structures and your patterns of operation, and you come away from that interaction going, oh, why did I do that? That just served to inflame the situation, or actually really regret how I acted. And what we teach, this observing awareness, is when you get good at it, you actually in the moment can observe, man, this person is really rubbing me the wrong way, but I don't want to react. I choose not to react because that will only serve to inflame the situation, and I won't get the result that I want out of this interaction. So the observing awareness comes in, or it's there the whole time, and it observes, I'm really irritated by this person. I want to react in a certain way, but that doesn't serve the outcome that I want. So I'm going to choose to act in a different way. And you come out of that interaction going, well, that was awesome because I was able to observe myself in the moment. I understood what was coming up for me, and I chose a different outcome for myself. And when you can get to that point, so empowering, so empowering.
Totally. And I mean, there's a couple of key things in what you've just said. First of all, you can develop the ability to self-observe in any moment. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes a really natural way of being. So that when you move into a situation that's conflictual or a situation that triggers you, your self-observer is in place and you see what's triggered. So you can go, oh, that part of me is triggered. I know what comes next if I follow that. And this person or this experience is what's triggering it. At that point, there's what we call a pattern interrupt, and you're making a far wiser choice as a result of that.
Absolutely.
Now, I just want to step back and aware of time, so we're going to move some things on. But a lot of people don't even know what it means to self-observe. So we're speaking because we've been trained to self-observe. So I just want to give a couple of examples of what it means to self-observe. So when we're growing up, often what happens is we learn to keep our awareness outside of ourselves. To self-observe means that we start to bring our awareness inside of ourselves, and we start to notice through the physiology what's happening on an emotional level for us. So as an example, the body has certain reactions when certain parts of the personality are triggered. So, basic example, Josh, what happens to your body when an angry part of your personality is triggered? Like, what would be a sign about what's happening in the body when an angry part's triggered?
My body heats up. I clench. I get tightened, or my body tightens up, sort of ready to fight.
Yep.
And I just feel, particularly in my stomach area and my chest, that kind of tightening, and that's stress, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So an absolutely unaware person, unconscious person who's not been taught to self-observe and keep their awareness in the body would be going about their day, and lots of things would be happening, and they might be getting this anger built up, but they've got no awareness that the anger is being built up. And then something happens and that person gets triggered and they go into an angry rant, and afterwards they feel terrible about it. Someone that had been trained to observe would have noticed at 9 o'clock that in the morning maybe that there was a tension heading into their shoulders, or they could feel their body heating up, and they would know, because of the observing awareness, an angry part of my personality is there. I know it, I can feel it, I can see it. Okay, now at that point, because they can observe it, they can suddenly do something about it. They might be able to go, okay, well, what do I need to do not to carry this angry part into the day, or what have you? So there's a whole bunch of things they could do as a result of seeing and knowing that. But the key thing here is through the physiology, learning to identify part of the personality is triggered, and then even understanding its story and what what it's doing. Now, so that's
Yeah.
a basis of observing, and I'm sure everyone can see why it's important to be able to do that if you want to change anything. In fact, it's what we call the awareness component. First of all, there's no transformation of any behavior or any result without being aware of the thing that's setting you up to have less than a perfect result. Okay, so awareness comes first. So self-observing allows one to develop the first part of what we call the transformational process, and that's self-awareness of the challenge or issue or thing that's going on within inside of you. The other aspect that I want to sort of talk about, as I said before, when you learn to build observing awareness, you will start to see things that you don't like to own about self. And if you've grown up with these concepts, which we all have, let's just imagine you grew up in a Christian family. What will happen is that you are going to learn that there's good behavior and there's bad behavior based on the moral code of the Christian church. And of course, the moral code of the Christian church or any church changes over time. But basically, you're going to learn that certain behaviors are good and bad.
Okay? Yeah, absolutely.
You might grow up in a we'll come back to that. So regardless of, you grow up in this environment, a lot of Christian orientation, which many people in the West have had. And so what you'll tend to do as a person is that you will want to mirror what was acceptable in the culture you grew up in. So in this example, whatever you were told was good about your human personality is what you'll want to own, and what you'll want to show yourself and the world, because its opposite is shamed and considered bad and wrong. Okay? So when you start to self-observe, and as an example, you might meet a part of you that's really selfish and mean. In this work, you're going to have to own that you've got this selfish and mean part, because a big part of this work is owning everything about your behavior and your personality, so you can really see it and observe it and have a lot of self-understanding. So what do you think happens for that person that may have come from that Christian orientation? They've been to church a lot, their families are a Christian family, learning those strong morals and values, good and bad orientation, and they start doing this work, and they actually, and they've come to it maybe because they want to improve their relationships. And they start to see that, geez, they've got this mean part that actually it gets a bit sort of, it's mean. It can be, and it wants to push people away, as an example. What do you think happens for the person, Josh, when they're...
Well, it pushes up against all their sets of sort of predetermined beliefs, all the beliefs that they were handed down from their lineage, from their parents, their upbringing, and they're sort of going, oh my God, I don't want to own this. This is really scary for me because this goes against everything that I've been taught, to be angry at people. Goodness, no, I can't own that. And it's quite scary and quite confronting sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that whatever the value system is, what you've grown up with, what the concept of good and bad, whatever that value system is within that society, you won't want to own those parts that were maligned within the value systems that you grew up. But the moment you don't own, it goes back into what we call unconscious territory, and it will still play itself out. So we can see, and it's probably cutting to the chase in the sense that to a big part of, first of all, we develop observing awareness. We learn to own and tell the truth about every behavior that we have, so we stop putting it outside on others. We just own how we are. And then you've got to have a lot of self-acceptance. You've actually got to be absolutely okay with who you are, and because you're going to own behaviors, and the more that you can self-accept yourself and be okay with who you are, the more you can own without beating yourself up, feeling shame, feeling guilt, and all those other patterns that will always be stopping you from ownership. Because the moment you feel guilty about a part of your personality, again, you won't want to own it.
Yeah.
I just quickly tell you, I worked with a business owner last week, a huge ego, which is going to slowly be broken down because he can't do the work without it. And it's not that huge because he has turned up and said, I want to work with you, Perry. But his he's really good at certain areas of his business, and he's not that great at marketing. And that's why his business was struggling, because his marketing wasn't that great. But he thought what he was doing was absolutely unbelievable, right? Because his ego could feel good when he goes, I'm really good at marketing. But once we looked at the stats, we could see that it wasn't working in the way that he wanted it to work.
Yeah.
And you should have seen the kind of fight that went on within him, not between him and I, as he started to see that he was skill deficient in the area of marketing. And he really fought internally owning that, because he wanted to say that the economy was the reason his business wasn't working. His ego couldn't say, look, I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
But it's not until he got to that point and could own that things could change. And that's why, again, you can see self-awareness, ownership, and then the ego has to be able to self-accept, which is a hard thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you want to say about that before we sort of close off?
Look, probably not. I just, in closing for everyone, like what we're bringing to everyone today is around developing this observing awareness, and it really comes down to being truthful about how you operate and your patterns of, or your standard patterns of operation, and firstly observing and understand why you operate the way you do, and then being prepared to observe, inspect, and explore what's truthful for you and what you want to be creating, and be prepared for the hard truths to come up as you have to own certain aspects of your personality.
Yeah, great. Okay, and just for anyone listening, if you have any questions that you would like us to answer in the podcast, videocast, just go to perrymardon.com and go to the Contact Us page and just send through your questions, and we will do our best to answer them in this video and podcast. One other announcement for those that are interested: I'm running a workshop in Melbourne, our Mind Sparks one-day workshop. In the last, just bringing up the dates, it's a whole day that we spend working with transformation, how to transform, how to get the results that you want, and we teach a lot of what we do on that day, so it's a very good learning experience. So that's the last weekend of February. Just putting up the dates. You can see how prepared I am.
I was going to say.
That's Sunday, 28th of February 2016 at the Ether Conference Centre. Again, if you want to attend that one-day event called Mind Sparks Workshop, your practical workshop to gain insight and create the results you want. And by the way, that's what this work is about. Really important to remember that. It's like, why, what are we here for? We want to create the life that inspires us, that we love, that we like. And so a big part of this work is owning the patterns that get in the way of that, so that we can create the life that we want, the relationships we want. So that date, again, 26th of February in Melbourne, Mind Sparks Workshop. Just go to perrymardon.com if you want to attend that day. $47, and you can bring a friend for free, so it's a pretty amazing deal. Anything else you want to say, Josh, before we sign off?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, like Perry said, if you've got any comments, any questions that you want us to answer about any patterns of behavior, things that are going on for you, just send us an email or either come through on the comments below on this video. That'd be great.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See ya. Thanks, Josh.
Bye.
The Human Behaviour Podcast is brought to you by www.perrymardon.com and genesisretreat.com.au.